Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest?
Welcome, everybody. This is a humorous history podcast, and we are the Goofy Historians.
Okay.
Today, we're
The
going to
sound effects are really goofy.
No, man, I'm going to do it again.
Oh, no. Don't.
Today, we're going to talk about the Epic of Gilda. Can I just call him Gilda? Gilgamesh.
You need to call him Gilda.
So, Gilgamesh, and David Pike told me that there's actually a heavy metal band or death metal band called Gilgamesh or something, or a song. But anyway,
Well, then we should get a folk one called Enkidu.
well, we haven't got to Enkidu yet. So anyway, welcome everybody to our Friday the 13th Humorous History Podcast. We're the Goofy Historians. Our motto is truth if possible, humor at all costs. We're not real historians. We're not real comedians. This is just for fun. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is kind of a serious topic in a way, because it's 5,000 years old. So it's kind of the oldest. It outdates the Bible and whatnot. But
Yeah,
it's
a couple thousand years, right?
by a millennium. But there should be a PG-13 warning on this show, on the poem itself. And I'm wondering in Mesopotamia if they had a rating PG-13, because, okay, this podcast will have a PG-13 rate. If you're under 13, log off right now. Because it's wild. It's wild. Okay, so we're going to talk about Gilgamesh, and we're going to break it up into three parts. So we're going to say what we're going to say, it, and then we are going to say what we said. Okay, so really, that's the way you're supposed to do things, right? I tell you what I'm going to tell you.
I'm glad you did some research on this.
Tell you, and then we told you what we told you. Okay, so we're going to break it out. The first one is the time period. We're going to talk about the languages, when it was discovered, this, that, and the other. The second part, we're going to talk about the poem itself, or the myth, or the song, or whatever it is. We're going to go through each of the books, sort of, and tell you the whole story. It's not short. And then third, we're going to sum it up and talk about why myths are important, or as I like to say, are they important? Okay,
just for entertainment value.
Exactly. That's the conclusion I came to. But so to start off with the time period, I thought this was so interesting. What I found out was that it was not, we as a modern society had no idea about Gilgamesh until 1850.
Yeah. It was lost for 2,000 years or 2,500 years about, right?
Yeah. So the story is that English dude it was in 1850, and he was on his way somewhere else, and he stopped there.
Dug up some trash.
And uncovered something. And they uncovered this giant tomb.
Yeah.
And maybe fill in the details, because even
they
still didn't discover it.
What he found was the old city of Nineveh, for God's sake. Nineveh from the Bible, right? Like Jonah.
Assyrian capital.
Who's the guy who got swallowed by Jonah? And the fish, right? That was the city he was supposed to go tell to repent.
Really? Jonah?
Yeah, Nineveh, right? Yeah, I think so. But the funny thing is, it's way up on the northern side of the Euphrates. So I don't know how Jonah got from the fish all the way there, but
the fish spit him out.
Just spit him.
For sure.
Probably, yeah. I believe that was Nineveh. Maybe I'm just making stuff up, but that's okay. We never claimed to be accurate.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Jonah was Nineveh. Yeah, but anyways, that's what he dug up. It was gone for a long time. I think it was gone even when when Alexander went through there. He saw these ruins and said, "What are these ruins?" And then he went on and conquered other people. But, yeah, so they were,
But what's interesting, so that was the time of the Bible, and the Assyrians and the Hittites and the Babylonians and the Israelites, they were all running around. But that is not when this poem was originally written. It was written in Mesopotamia thousands of years before that. So the people of let's just say, Babylon were enjoying the Epic of Gilgamesh, but it was something that it was ancient. It was thousands of years old, correct?
Yeah, so they were reading it. As I could go through a real brief history of the Middle East up until the time of Jerusalem. First, there was Sumer, or Samaria, which was the cities of the lower down on the Euphrates and the Tigris, right? And they were the first ones. History began there. They're the first ones who had indoor plumbing, for God's sake. The first ones who came up with writing. The first ones who come up with the buddy story. First to come up with the gods and a concept of religions and the temples, which also served as a house of prostitution. I thought that was great, right? They did. I mean, later in development, they separated those two. But at the beginning,
So this was about what, 3000 BC?
About 3000 BC, 3500, 3500, I guess 4000 BC is when it started. The city itself, they put up the walls. I guess walls were the state-of-the-art technology. That was cutting edge, to put up a wall, because they kept talking about how great Uruk was to have these great walls.
Well, that wall was
right. It was like having the latest iPod, right? Or like,
I don't know, a 6 mile giant wall.
Yeah, it was huge.
That's right? Even impressive today.
Yeah. So, and they came up with the first written language, which was cuneiform. Yeah, and what's not funny, what I thought was fascinating, Sumerian is a what they call a language isolate. That means it's not related to any other language, right? Mm-hmm. And like when the Akkadians and the Assyrians yeah, and the Babylonians came down and conquered it and set up their throne, their language was as different from Sumerian as English is to Chinese. It's a totally different language.
Well, and, right. Sumerian was basically one step above Flintstonian.
Probably
that's what they spoke.
That's probably what the Flintstones. It's probably what the Flintstones actually spoke, right?
Exactly. It was
right out of the Stone Age.
When they talk about people in the country was actually the hunter and gatherer Stone Age people.
Yeah. So that was the big thing about the walls, right? You separated your city from country folk, which is sort of like what Gilgamesh is all about, right? Enkidu versus Gilgamesh. But so yeah, no, taking too long.
No, that's fine.
But the Akkadians were the first one to take over, and they spoke Akkadian, but they took the Sumerian alphabet, and then the Akkadians got taken over by the Babylonians, and the Babylonians got taken over by the Assyrians, and the Assyrians got taken over by the Neo-Babylonians, and then but they all kept speaking Sumerian as the literary language, even when Sumerian was no longer spoken. So like Sumerian was like the Latin of the ancient world. People were speaking it and writing it, and so that's was how they actually were able to interpret it, because these people up in Nineveh had to learn Sumerian, just like people in the old days had to learn Latin and Greek, right? So they had all these primer books where they were writing out Sumerian. They had like Akkadian words on one side and Sumerian words on the other side, and then they had all these like language books where you wrote it out in Akkadian, and then right under it you had to write it out in Sumerian. And since it's phonetic, right, we actually know what Sumerian sounds like, right? Because Akkadian is a Semitic language. It's just like, well, it's the same language as Hebrew and Arabic, right? And Persian is a language, it's just like English and Greek. It's a Indo-European language. So the languages there are basically all related to languages we speak today, except for Sumerian. And we know what Sumerian sounds like because they came up with this alphabet. Oh, what was interesting is that Egypt used Sumerian. right? Or they used Akkadian, the Sumerian alphabet. When they had to like write letters back and forth, for diplomatic purposes, they weren't using the Egyptian hieroglyphs, for God's sake. They were using the diplomatic language of the day, which was Sumerian.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
thousands of years, at least centuries later, after that was no longer a thing.
Yeah. So the last temple that taught Sumerian was like 600 BC, which is, right at the time of the Greeks and the Romans starting, or the Greeks were starting. So, so yeah, it lasted a long time. And after that, but after 500, people gave up on it, I guess, because of the institutional religions that were going on. It was the pivotal age.
So that is so crazy. I think there's actually books and stuff written about how it was originally found.
Oh yeah, the whole story of how it was found is just translated, right?
And
how they translated this stuff.
It took a long
Those
time.
Those guys are so smart, right?
They
had to go because they were taught Greek and Latin, right? And then like there's these Greek with Persians, and then Persian and Akkadian parallel texts, and then they could step by step they could get all the way back to Sumerian. But I guess it was all English guys, mostly English and German guys. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was so funny. So I just have this picture of how that transpired. So the little English did, they happen upon this tomb, and it's huge, and there's the walls are filled with drawings and stuff, and poor Gilgamesh is on these stone tablets, and there's a bunch of them. There's like 75 or something, and they were sitting there, and they didn't even get to Gilgamesh for like 12 years. They were so trying to figure out the walls and the ceiling and this other stuff, and by the time they got to
Gilgamesh, right?
They figured out, because the guy was looking through it, and he saw the thing about the flood, and then all of a sudden became the most important.
Yeah, because it's related to the Bible.
Okay, so
that's one thing you could say good about the evangelical Christians at that time. They sponsored a lot of the archaeology.
They didn't have the dates right. But anyway, they didn't
have the dates right, but that was huge when they could get an independent verification of sort of a parallel version of Noah's story. They said, "Oh, therefore it's true."
I think that's a good. I think that's a good segue, because we mentioned Noah's story. It's a good segue to the second part of this podcast, which we're going to talk about is the epic itself, the story, the myth, and it's so important. I mean, it's so relevant today that I can even talk about people in today's society while we're talking about this. I'll talk about Bill Cosby, Louis C.K.
So why don't I remember these conversations are unrehearsed, right? So you got to give us a break. But I can do the play-by-play, and you can do the color.
All right, go ahead. Go through the epic. Book 1 with Enkidu.
Yeah, with Gilgamesh. Yeah.
With Gilgamesh.
So when it starts out, Gilgamesh, first of all, is historically actually a king of Uruk. It's one of the cities. He's actually a recorded king. So he must have been great, because the stories kept adding on about him. But when he was young, he was apparently extremely handsome, just over the top handsome, like, Tom Cruise or something, but tall, right? He was like really tall, really athletic, just super amounts of energy. He was on like speed the whole time. And he was the king, and he was extremely young. And so he got up in the morning and got everybody out of bed so he could play sports with them. He chased them around, and he played baseball with them. He actually had a bat and a ball. In one of the other stories, not Gilgamesh, but one of the other, he invented baseball apparently. And he was making love to everybody's wife, and he just could not.
Wait, hold on right there. So what you're saying is that before they got married, Gilgamesh
had the right to first.
So basically, you're saying he was a serial rapist. I mean, this guy raped more people than Bill Cosby. Okay.
That's true, but it was legal.
Okay.
But but that's what pissed off Enkidu. That's why they got into. But we're skipping ahead, right?
Okay.
But yeah, he had anytime anybody got married, he spent the first night with the wife, right? So the people of Uruk, which was a city he was king of, got tired of him, and they went to the gods. They prayed to the gods and says, "What are we going to do? This Gilgamesh is just going to wear us out. It's like having like a kid with, attention deficit disorder.
He's running amok.
Right? He was just running amok. And so what I like this about their gods is like they had a meeting. They all got together and they said, well, what are we going to do? Right. And what they came to, instead of like just killing Gilgamesh or giving him a lobotomy or drugging him up, with some medicine to calm him down, they doubled down. They said what he needs is someone who's his equal. It's also interesting. Gilgamesh his mother was a goddess, and his father was human. And then they said he was 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, which doesn't make sense mathematically. You can never be 1/3 something, right? It's always going to be divisible by 2, right? You can be
right.
Like
so he was 2/3. He was 2/3 divine, but and the thing that what makes a myth is it has some supernatural qualities to the story. So what makes him divine is his supernatural qualities where he can run and stuff. But he's as dumb as a goat, and he's clearly a man. He's clearly mortal.
Well, he's supposed to be extremely intelligent too. But anyway, so he's like 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. And in order to control him, they go off outside the walls, and they get some just like the creation of Adam in the second creation story of Genesis, where they make Enkidu, which is the outside the walls, uncivilized version of Gilgamesh. So he's
okay, hold on. The name Enkidu to begin with, that's just too damn cute of a name. I mean, I really think that the Japanese named him like Pokemon, I'm sorry, but come on.
He was like a Pokemon.
And especially if that's how we really know that that we really know how it's pronounced. It's just too damn cute. Enkidu, Pokemon.
But he's as tall as Gilgamesh, and he's as energetic as Gilgamesh, but he has no divinity to him. He's like 1/2 animal and 1/2 human, right? He's born directly from the earth, like Adam. They take clay and they spit on it and they mold him and they put some hair on him and breathe life into him, and he's raised by the animals.
Right.
He's a vegetarian.
He's a vegetarian.
Yeah. He eats the grass, and he takes the water at the watering pool, and he runs with the antelope. He was milked by the antelope, and he was peaceful and he was happy.
He pissed off the trapper,
he always protecting the animals. So he protected the animals. So if there was an animal in a trap, he went and took the animal out of the trap and set it loose, because that was like his mother or his brother or something. So this is like the Adam story. He begins in innocence, freedom and innocence, but he's corrupted because he's untrapping all the animals. A trapper, a hunter, captures him and introduces him to a prostitute who's also the temple priestess, and he had an erection for 7 days, I guess, after being in the wilderness. So he was probably 17, 18
Gilgamesh,
at the time too.
That Gilgamesh sent the goddess out to have sex with. Yeah, didn't he? Or in one of the translations he did.
No. It was her priestess.
Okay.
It was Shamat. Shamat was the priestess of the temple of Ishtar.
Right. And Shamat's just like,
she went out there, and
she didn't even question it. She's like, I'm gonna go have sex with this guy, and off she went.
Off she went.
Turned him civilized.
Well, that was the first step.
Right.
First he was with the hunters, then he was with the prostitute, and after he was with the prostitute, he was trotting back to the animals, and they all ran away from him. They all like took off,
Right.
and because he had lost his innocence. And she says, "Well, you can never go back again. You can never go back. You can never make Enkidu great again. You got to go forward." So, next step, they took him to the village where he learned to eat and wear clothes, and then finally he went to Uruk, where as soon as he went into Uruk, Gilgamesh was going towards this new bride that he was going to rape to sort of get it ready for her husband, right?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it was okay. Maybe she liked it. He was probably really handsome, but it pissed off. Or
maybe that was a misinterpretation, and it was just that he was promiscuous when he was younger.
But Enkidu stood in the way of Gilgamesh and the bride, and they had a fight, and they fought for a long time, and finally
they fought for so long they turned gay.
They did turn basically gay. They loved each other, but this was like the movies where like the two guys beat the shit out of each other, and afterwards they become friends. That's exactly what happens. That's when it becomes the buddy movie, right? So I guess he forgot all about the wife he's supposed to rape, and he goes off with.
He turned gay.
Oh, then he finds. So he's talking to Enkidu.
He liked it. If it was in modern day,
have to go.
If it was in modern day, they would have got an apartment together in Queens. I mean, that's the level that they were at. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But they didn't want to. They wanted glory just for the sake of glory. They wanted fame. They wanted to be famous forever.
No, I think that Gilgamesh, it was just kind of an idea out of the blue.
Oh, that's right. It was mostly Gilgamesh who wanted to go out and get fame, and Enkidu was trying to talk him out of it.
Yeah. Right? So what I was going to say about Enkidu is that there's a Louis C.K. bit where he's talking about the worst friend ever, and he's overhearing these two girls in line to get coffee, and one says, "I don't know if I can do it. Did he call you?" And she's like, "No, he didn't call me." "Well, he's a piece of shit. You're perfect. There's no reason he shouldn't call you." So it's like, that's the worst friend you could ever overhear, right? Just somebody who would be like, because the guy didn't call you, he's a piece of shit, and you're the most perfect thing ever. That's not a friend, right? That's the opposite of a friend. If somebody just is like hanging around, you're just perfect. You're perfect. You're perfect. And that's how Enkidu was. At first, I mean, sometimes he would be like the voice of logic and be like, "Nah, you shouldn't do that." But then later he would be like, "Oh, you're perfect. Everybody's a piece of shit, but you're perfect." I'm serious. He was the worst friend ever. But go ahead.
Gilgamesh says, "We have to go find glory so we can live forever." So they're going to go to Lebanon and chop down all the cedars of Lebanon and kill Humbaba, which is this demon god protecting the forest. Right?
Humbaba. And that's actually how they pronounced it. Right? So that's how they pronounced it 5,000 years ago. I swear the Japanese were there. Let's call the monster Humbaba.
Humbaba. Maybe it's a language isolate related to Japanese. Japanese is a language isolate too, I think. So, anyways, they go.
Say, though. Come on.
So they're from Europe, which is near the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf, depending if you're Persian or Arabian, I guess. But they go up and they, which is in Lebanon, which is a long way, but it only takes them like a week walking, and they kill Umbaba, which is really sad because. Plus, they have the god Shamat, one of the gods helping them, so it's really not fair.
Yeah.
And Yamat, they finally kill Yamat after a big battle, and he's like begging for them to save his life. And Enkidu's the one who's telling him not to do it, not to do it. This guy's too scary, right? But the two of them, they kill him. And he's begging to save his life, and they says, no, don't listen to him, kill him. So they kill Umbaba, which is really sad because Umbaba doesn't seem like that, but he was just doing his job, right?
Right.
I mean, Umbaba wasn't going to Uruk and trying to take their walls. right? He was just trying to protect the stupid, the cedar
cedars.
forests, the cedars, which was his job, right? He was just doing his job, right? But they kill him and they chop down the whole friggin' forest. I mean, what happened to Enkidu? I mean, that's where I lost respect for Enkidu, right? I mean, I can see
I'm
like
best friend ever. You're perfect.
leaving nature and going to the city, but then coming back and destroying nature. I mean, that's what like Americans do, right? I mean,
and in the beginning, when they first got into the forest, Gilgamesh got scared, and then Enkidu was the one that said, "Oh, keep going, be brave."
Yeah. Once they're there, he goes, "Keep going," and then they destroy the forest, and they chop down this big cedar tree, and the thing is, they're pissing off all the gods, right? Or it's not all the gods, but some of the powerful gods, and they take this big tree back to Uruk and build this big door for some god, and then they're making a parade through the street, and apparently they're only like 21 at this time, and they have like they're really good shape. They're at the peak of their physical performance, and they're strutting with all the gold and the silver. And Ishtar says, "Man, they're hot. They're really hot." So she wants to come down and get it on with Gilgamesh, and he's so well. I guess maybe because he is in love with Enkidu, right? He doesn't. Ishtar, who's like. Ishtar is like the
hottest god
Ishtar
ever.
Is it?
And they just throw her they kick her to the curb.
Yeah, they kick her to the curb. Who's like the Venus and the Aphrodites of other civilizations? She's like the goddess of love, and he's so infatuated with Enkidu, and they're strutting around that he pushes her aside very rudely. And so she starts crying, and she goes up to her father god, which I think is Anu, the sky god or something. And she says, "Give me your bowl. I need your bowl. I'm going to go let the bowl out and destroy humans."
The bowl of what? The bowl of heaven.
The bowl of heaven, right? The bowl of heaven they're going to let loose. And he said, Anu goes, "Well, if you let the bowl loose, you're going to cause a lot of damage, and there's going to be like 7 years of famine." And she goes, "I don't give a shit." And so he says, "Okay," and he gives the bowl of heaven, and she sends it down, and he's like drinking up the Tigris and drinking up the Euphrates and causing all these soldiers to die. But Enkidu and Gilgamesh get the better of them. They just took down Umbaba, right? So a bowl of heaven is just, not much. So they kill the bowl of heaven, and that pisses everybody off. All the gods are pissed at them now, right?
Yeah.
So the gods get together in another conference. I mean, these gods remind me of
a Zoom call. The gods all have a Zoom call.
I think that these gods remind me of a Silicon Valley startup.
Yeah.
Right?
They have no idea. They just let's move fast and break things.
Exactly. This is the first time there's gods around, right? So they're just like doing what they can. And then, so they say, well, one of them's got to go. We needed Enkidu to sort of be a counterbalance for Gilgamesh, but apparently it wasn't a counterbalance. They just multiplied. Right? They just enabled each other. So they killed Enkidu. He died of some disease, some wasting disease of 7 days. And then after he died, Gilgamesh hugged him for 7 days until like a worm came out of his nose, and then he was disgusted.
He wouldn't let him bury him and stuff. And then he was just inconsolable.
He was inconsolable. And then he leaves the city. He throws away all his gold and his silver, and he wanders around the Mideast, and he kills lions and put on their clothes, and he doesn't eat food. And then he goes through the sun, where the sun goes at night or something, this tunnel, and he goes through that, and then he gets on the other, he goes through this forest,
like tavern.
He gets to the tavern, right, which is great, right? And there's this at the end of the world, the tavern it's like from the tavern at the end of the world, from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something. And there's this really nice woman there, and she's like, I don't know who she serves when Gilgamesh is in there, because she goes, there's no humans, but she has a tavern. I guess she serves the gods when they show up, maybe, I don't know. But she says, what the hell are you doing here, right? It's like people die people die, Gilgamesh, right? What did you think? I mean, you killed the bull, you killed Umbaba, you know, and now Enkidu's dead. That's life, right? Just go back to Uruk and enjoy yourself with the time you got left. And he goes, no. He says, well, she says, if you want to, you go across the sea and you do these other adventures and you get to this island where Noah is.
Right, Noah. Turns out Noah was a king too.
Yeah, it turns out Noah was a king too. Yeah. But Noah was actually, he's the only human. He wasn't Noah. He was a Utnam Pishna. Utnam Pishna was the Noah version, right? So he meets him and he says, and basically the only, so it's then it tells the flood story again from the Sumerian perspective, a little different than the biblical version. In the biblical
instead
version,
of 40 days, it was 7 days.
It was 7 days.
Yeah, it was funny because, like, yeah, it wasn't 40 days and 40 nights of rain. It was just 7.
7 days, but I guess it rained harder, right?
It rained a lot harder.
It just rained hard. It was the rate that's important, right? Not the time. But and the difference is that in the biblical story, God destroys the earth because people were evil, right? And there was iniquity on the face of the earth. In this story, they were just noisy. The God, let me see if I get his name. Enlil, which is like the father god, or the king of the gods.
Yeah, why did the first flood happen?
Well, the reason it happened with Enlil because he says these humans are making too much noise.
Ah.
They're too noisy. I can't stand it. I can't sleep. I can't sleep. Like, they're like noisy all the time. He doesn't give a shit what they're doing. All he cares about is that they're noisy and they're rambunctious and they're causing chaos. And he says we have to destroy them. So he tries to destroy them a lot of different ways, but Enki, which is another god, keeps helping him out. He says first he tries to starve him, and he says, well, you know, you can actually eat the babies or something. And then there's a disease, and he teaches them how to get medicine. So finally, Enlil says, forget it, I'm going to flood them out, right? And they get together, he gets all the gods together. He says, now don't tell anybody. This is a secret. Don't tell anybody that I'm going to kill all the humans with a massive flood. And Enkidu goes, well, I'm not telling anybody, right? So he comes down to Upanishad's house, and he starts talking to the wall.
Yeah,
he says, hey, wall, there's going to be a big flood. You know, hey, wall, why don't you build a boat, and why don't you get your family on this boat, because Enlil is really pissed at you, and this is the only way you can be saved. And then when they found out, they go, well, I didn't tell anybody. I was talking to the wall. I can't help it if these people overheard. But he did overhear, and he built the. But this one, he didn't just get him and his family. He got all of the animals, and he got all of the people of all the trades, right? He got like carpenters, he got butchers, he got farmers, and he put them all on the boat, which makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
Because Noah, when he got off the thing, he had to fit in everything. He had to invent everything all over again.
Think about what the Mesopotamia's Noah reward for all that was. The some bitch has to live out there by himself. The only person who even knows him is the lady that runs the tavern. What's so great about that? You live forever. Nobody knows who you are. You're all by yourself forever.
Well, he's got his wife. He's got his wife.
Oh, for the love of God. He started hating
that was part of the torture.
Holy crap. Anyway, so Gilgamesh.
You have to live with your wife forever. So actually, she was very nice, because when Gilgamesh finally got to him, he said, no, you can't get immortality. That's out of the option. You got to go back and, basically he calls him a fool, and he says you should be the king of Uruk. That's your dharma, to go back and be the king of Uruk. Like, get the hell out of here. But the wife says, well, why don't you give him some new clothes before you send him off, right? So he says, well, okay, maybe I'll give him so they gave him some new clothes and a new hat, and they send him off. And they also tell him there's this little plant at the bottom of the ocean that if you get it, you won't make you immortal, but it will make you young, right? So you just get old and then eat it, and then you have to like renew it, so you're not really immortal, but
that
basically
part with
you can be
the
immortal.
Immortal plant,
Yeah,
It didn't need it. It was like an appendix. It doesn't have anything to do with the story. You could have it or you could not have it. It
because he
doesn't
lost it
matter.
to a snake. But that explains why snakes shed their skin, right? Because they're immortal, right? They just go,
Okay.
yeah.
So
But
he
then, but
has the
that's the
whole
end.
mortal
He goes
plant
back.
and he
He goes back to
loses
Uruk,
it.
and he says, "Well, this is it." And he comes to terms with his immortality and says, "I'm going to write my sort of like Trump. He's going to write his name on every brick, right? And that's going to be his immortality. Of course, the bricks are made out of mud, so he didn't think
But they're
through that.
baked and the
They're baked,
fragments
right?
and they're still readable today, which is amazing. So yeah, so the whole thing with that last little appendix when he's on his way and he gets the plant that's going to give you immortality and he just leaves it on the ground and goes and takes a bath or a nap or something and then the snake steals it. So it's like, you know what, he's a dumbass. Oh, come on. So he gets back and he rules and everybody loves him because now he's all moderate, right? He learned his
Yeah,
lesson.
the whole thing. He became a moderate at the end, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he grew up. He grew up. It
he
started
grew
when he
up.
was like 17. Now he's probably 30 or 40, and he went through all these experiences, and he realizes he's lost. Like before, he was like killing people, and it never really dawned on him that like Umbaba when he was dying. I mean, he saw this guy being afraid of death, but it didn't phase him, right?
Yeah, his
Uh,
first if Gilgamesh meets anybody new, his default position is I'll fight you and kill you when he was young. That is just an automatic default. Oh, somebody new, must kill them. And after all his journeys and
rape or
stuff,
kill, right?
rape and kill.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
So they're not. He wasn't a likable person. I mean, he
not
was an
in the
exciting
beginning.
person. I'm surprised Hollywood hasn't made a movie, or have they?
I don't know, but they should. And here's some of my thoughts on this: is that because the epic, whether it's a poem, I think actually some of it was a freaking song because it just keeps repeating itself like
Yeah,
a chorus.
repeats a lot. So it's got to be. It was probably from the oral tradition, right? Before they
From
wrote it
yeah,
down.
so he was a real dude, probably, right? And he was a real dude that sucked when he was young and became a good guy when he was older. Now, as they fill in the details and they keep this poem and this around, think about it from the perspective of the ruler. So say you're, hundreds of years later, and now you're the ruler of Uruk or some other city that's play is prevalent. Is it a warning for you? Or is it a warning for the people? In other words, like for a king, because you're a king, but everybody knows the story of Gilgamesh. So you're constantly reminded, well, I better not go raping because bad things will happen. And so it's kind of like, because if you're the king, you could have abolished all stories of Gilgamesh, but they didn't ever. So
No,
it
they
was,
added to it mostly, right? I mean,
yeah, they added to it.
yeah, it went through the Babylonians. It went to the Akkadians. It went through the Babylonians. The Assyrians loved it, right?
Yeah.
And then the
So
Neo-Babylonians, and then the Persians, and even it shows up in the Old Testament, right? I mean, so it was a story that clicked. I mean, it clicked with me. I mean, you understood these people. They were so real. I mean, this
yeah,
stuff is like 5,000 years old, and you could I mean, you may not like them, but you go, yeah, that's me. It reminded me of me and you when we were little in New Mexico. We did
maybe,
the macho games. Do you remember that? Running around the
maybe,
arroyo throwing rocks at things.
right, maybe, or myths need to be updated over time. So this segue into the last concluding section here before we come up on an hour. But in my humble opinion, and I know nothing, but I would venture to argue that myths are not forever. They're not immortal. I don't, you know what we could use? We could use new myths for this new era. How about a myth of somebody who had a great reality TV show and then went too far and became president. Some myth that's relevant today, because the myths that we're looking at, there's so many, and we all know them. There's Achilles and Moses and the
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right? I mean, Starsky and Hutch.
No,
what I'm saying is,
no, my point is we need new, better myths for this new era, because the here's a myth, for example, like Moses comes down with a mountain. He's got these 10 commandments, right? Do not kill. You know what? I don't think we need a myth to understand that, because you know what? If killing wasn't against the law, there'd just be a lot more killing, right? Could you imagine if killing was legal, or maybe just a misdemeanor? Like, killers would kill a lot, and just like ordinary people would kill. Or like,
I don't think if killing was, I don't think, well, maybe.
You're missing the point. It's humor at all costs.
Yeah, but one person told me, I go, if you don't believe in God, how come you don't kill people? And I go, it's like, that's the only thing preventing you from killing people, is that you believe in God? I mean, that sucks. So you're like a mass murderer who's just waiting.
No, I'm sorry, my brother, but you missed my point. That was humor, right? It was humor. So if you're
supposed to give a sign when you're being funny.
So the joke is, I got to go back and tell the joke now. So basically,
okay, start over. Now that I know it's a joke.
If killing was legal, there'd be a lot more of it, and then you could go on from there. But that's a joke, and I'll run the punchline. I'll be here all week. Thank you. But the bigger point is that myths. We need new myths. I mean, I don't need a myth of Moses with the 10 Commandments to tell me not to fucking kill somebody. That's dumb. Some of these myths, myths are important. I don't think so. I think we can transcend that in the 21st century. We don't need myths from the Bronze Age to tell us how to live in the 21st century. What we need is 21st century myths to help us live.
Well, the 20th century myth is science, right? I mean, that's what's supposed to be the substitute or some type of, and science doesn't have all the answers. It's just an approximation. Science is always ever going to be just an approximation. Of course, I'm a statistician. Like, I know scientists don't know. I work with them, right? They don't know everything, right? They get it close enough that it's workable and reproducible.
Right.
But they fundamentally, they don't know.
Right.
They know within a margin of error. Right? They go, well, plus or minus 10%, we got this down. But in religion, you just knew 100%, right? That's the difference between religion and science. Science is always going, well, future discoveries could show me I'm wrong. Like Isaac Einstein, Newton, went beyond Galileo. Einstein went beyond Newton, right? It's just because you understand more, right? They're all approximations, but they're getting it closer and closer. But in the end, nobody knows the truth. The truth is unknowable, right?
I think that myths are entertainment. There should be nothing there. Unless they're somehow relevant for today, then we should enjoy myths purely as entertainment, just like the Catholic Church should be enjoyed just as history.
Yeah, I think, and we should be able to. It's like I think one of the most beautiful things about the Catholic Church is the Mass, right? That is the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. But I don't believe it's true, right? But it still would be. But like
architecture.
The architecture and the cadence and the flow and everything, it's like, can we just appreciate that as art? Like a little bit of the Middle Ages that sort of floated up to the present, right? And get away with all the, it's like so there can be good things about mythology, and you can appreciate them without actually believing. Like, I don't believe in Ishtar, but I wish I did.
Well, and the thing is, it's like you almost, like in the very beginning, I put a PG-13 warning on this podcast. Myths should have a warning. Do not take literal, dumbass. Don't be a dummy. All right.
One thing I will say at the end was that in the Noah in the Bible, right? is that just to show its influence from, I mean, he brought that story with him when he left Ur and ended up in Israel, or what would become Israel. But after the flood was over, they had a sacrifice and they killed a lamb or something. Like that's what God really wanted, right? He wanted them to kill a lamb, and then the smoke went up to heaven, and God smelled the smoke of the fire of the barbecue, and he said that was good. And that's the only place in the Bible where God actually smells, right? He actually can get a sense of something. So it's that, you know, what you understand, like the Sumerian gods doing. The Sumerian gods are always like smelling stuff and hearing stuff and tasting stuff. But that was the last little vestige of the Sumerian gods that show up in the Old Testament. That God gets to actually take a big whiff of a sacrifice, a barbecue, and appreciate it.
That's so crazy. And you do get the Epic of Gilgamesh does give you a insight into how they lived 5,000 years ago. It tells you about their gardens and their city and the people that lived in the country. You are there. I'm not saying anything derogatory about the Epic of Gilgamesh, not at all. It's fabulous. I'm just saying that when people say that we can't live without myths, I don't buy that. But it's great. It's a great story, and I'm so glad we had a chance to do that, because I don't know when we'll be back to the Bronze Age, because we're headed to New Mexico and the Inquisition and the non-burning of witches. Still can't find one that they burned.
We have to go to Spain to do that, right? And the Protestant Reformation, they were into burning witches, right?
You never know.
Actually, it's funny. The Protestants were way more into burning witches than the Catholics were. They were much more intolerant to witches. So we can discuss that in some other topic. Yeah. All
right. Well, we sure appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back. You can see us on Patreon, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye. Adios.
Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest? Does history repeat itself? Not really. But sometimes it kind of rhymes.